Hey everyone, welcome back to Innovation Unplugged, where we explore ideas and innovators driving the future of technology. I'm Jim Brismitzis, and today I'm joined by Alex Smith, the co-founder and CEO of Nectar, a company that's on a mission to simplify and accelerate edge computing. Nectar is rethinking how we manage and scale distributed infrastructure, turning everyday locations into powerful, secure compute environments. Whether it's enabling AI workloads at the edge or improving operational agility for enterprises, Alex and his team are building what many believe is to be the next frontier of the cloud. So if you're curious about what the future of decentralized infrastructure looks like, today is the day to be unplugged. Alex, welcome very much for being part of our show.
Thanks for having me, and that was very kind. Thank you. Great intro.
By the way, as a fun aside, Alex and I are both Canadian, so if you hear a lot of the sorries and thank yous,
And the A's.
Exactly. Yep. And then I'm joined by my dog Cody today, who's going to be sitting in and listening to our conversation. So, Alex, let's jump into our conversation. There's so much happening in the AI world, but as you and I were chatting about over beers a little while ago, AI without data is not really AI. A lot of that data exists outside of corporate environments, whether it be their hyperscaler instances or tenants, or even their own private clouds as well.
Sure.
So I always like to start these shows with, what was the origin behind Nectar? Let's start there, and then kind of dive into the mission you're on and the opportunity.
Yeah, well, to try to keep it short, I founded the company about last fall officially, and the whole AI market was starting to explode. In particular, right now, it's bleedingly obvious that inference is exploding. By the end of the decade, it's going to be a $250 billion business, and that's going to drive 3 times the amount of edge traffic. Just to touch on what you said, AI isn't AI without data, and pretty much every single AI workload right now has to travel insane distances, and shipping all that raw data maybe thousands of miles to just 180 back. I think it's extremely inefficient, and it is costly because of backhaul and egress. Not to mention that adds a lot of latency, maybe 100 to 200 milliseconds of latency, and that prevents real-time AI use cases that we haven't even been able to think about because it's not really possible. So I think that we really need to build for the future, and I believe that distributing AI compute to the far edge, the network edge, it just makes sense. But despite 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars invested in edge computing and edge AI computing, startups keep dying on the wire. You and I just heard a very noteworthy one.
Yep.
Met its demise. And we spent a lot of time analyzing why that is. And the result of that is we're building the box and the brain. And it's an integrated solution, hardware and software, to enable telco operators and even enterprises that just want on-prem AI compute. And it will deliver 20 millisecond loops with governed multi-tenancy, and very critically reduce backhaul by 70 to 90%. So hopefully that wasn't too verbose.
No, it's actually spot on. And it aligns, Alex, very well with the proof of concept that we have operating here at Chasm Labs. As you know, we have been on a several-month journey with the city of Bellevue in setting up pedestrian safety using AI. And when we modeled what the cost would be for backhaul on an annualized basis, it could be as little as $600,000 a year. It could be as much as over $1 million a year. So that backhaul is really a critical cost constraint, if you will, for enterprises who, and that's just city of Bellevue, right? Relatively confined. But if you're an enterprise operating across an entire nation like the US or globally, you can imagine what those costs are. So let's say transport is definitely one of the the impediments to leveraging data that rests on the edge or is on the edge.
Yep.
But you also mentioned speed, and speed is actually
Mhm.
quite important too. For at least the use case that we have been implemented for pedestrian safety, that millisecond performance is actually quite imperative, and it's imperative from our
Yep.
standpoint because it could mean a decision that a machine makes, and frankly life and death.
Right.
If you
Yeah.
delay too much. So, from given what you have seen, what are customers? What is the market clamoring for? It's not just, hey, I'm going to put compute on the edge, but it's other things too. And I think there's some really interesting tricks up your sleeve that you're pursuing in that regard.
Well, that's you bring up such an interesting point. Several months ago, I had a conversation with Andreessen Horowitz, just reaching out, wanted to share my vision, and the person I spoke to really didn't believe that there were any sub 20 millisecond AI use cases. Didn't believe there was a market there at all, like at all, because every single AI workload is processed in the cloud, so nobody can really attain it. But what you just said is an example of what can be achieved if you enable such ultra low latency, like public
Yep.
safety. We are in Q4. We're launching our pilots, and we're going to launch it with 2 day one wedges. And I think that these 2 wedges probably account for the absolute vast majority of edge AI workloads and probably value. So the first one is vision events at points of presence. So turning raw video into tiny little events locally so that we can cut 70% of that backhaul and hit that 20 millisecond latency. Examples: public safety, could be manufacturing. The use cases go on and on and on. But one thing that just came up last week from Meta in their earnings report is they're now just starting to test Gen AI ads.
Yep.
And by the way, ads just passed $1 trillion. So imagine that an ad, I don't have Instagram or Facebook, I only have LinkedIn, but imagine that you're scrolling through your feed. And within that real-time bidding pipeline, hyper-personalized creative is added to that ad. It's pretty easy and intuitive to understand, holy cow, that's going to drive way more impressions and way more conversions. But at the scale of $1 trillion, these single-digit millisecond creative and variant decisions near users, those tiny lifts can move billions of dollars. So I think that's going to be a huge driver. And telcos are perfectly situated to take advantage of it. But where is it?
Yeah.
Telcos have struggled because of CapEx, complexity. We're trying to remove all of that with our turnkey OpEx model.
Right. And I think therein lies the opportunity for the carriers. It's a way for them, keep me honest here, it's a way for them to monetize their network footprint.
Which everybody's been talking about
Totally.
for a long time, but hasn't happened yet.
Right. You mentioned, Alex, that there has been attempts on the edge in the past, and sadly, some startups have sort of lost the battle in that regard. I think it's obvious as to why, but I'll put my supposition out there and have you react to it, which is edge at the time was really just around placing applications on the edge.
Yes.
Versus today, you're essentially placing a distributed system for AI that can now make sense of data where the data is, avoid the expensive and timely routing of that data back to some centralized source, whatever it may be.
Yep.
So I think it's safe to say that the edge, in the sense of just placing applications and securing them and such, wasn't really enough demand for that in the market. But AI kind of changed that. Is that what you're seeing too?
Absolutely. In fact, research is showing that the majority of AI workloads are going to come through 5G and soon 6G networks, the vast majority. So yes, 100%. Considering how explosive the growth of AI is right now, and already knowing that the entirety of the US and, other first world countries, we're already hitting power constraints.
Yeah.
We're already hitting network bandwidth constraints. We're not even efficiently cooling down all of these facilities. We can't just solve the problem by building more and more AI factories. It just won't work. So we have to, change our mindset, but not just use a sledgehammer to do so, because you can't just will some massive complex legacy infrastructure to change overnight. You have to work with all the stakeholders involved, the telcos, the towercos, the end customers, the enterprise, to really figure out, okay, what does everybody need, and bring that integrated solution to the table so that you can really enable adoption, which is what really the entire market struggled with. Like, you and I have had the conversation. You and I, and probably several other people, are still even trying to validate the market. Edge AI and the market opportunity has been talked a lot. It's been a lot of market research. Everybody can go and find, a McKinsey report showing how big it's going to be, but nobody's actually validated it yet. And it's really because adoption has either been nearly impossible or just too much of a headache and complex for developers to even want to touch it.
Agreed. And the complexity, right, Alex? Because with the known availability zones and the classic hyperscale implementation, or even just private clouds that enterprises are running, you kind of know where everything is. When you get to the edge, if you're a big logistics provider, or if you're doing public safety, or whatever the use cases are, it is highly distributed at that point, and it's hard to predict, where the workloads will be placed. So that leads me to, pretty intelligently actually, a nice next question to ask you, which is, what is Nectar, right? It's not just, as we would say in the old IT days, JBODs with some compute, right? This is a truly distributed multi-tenant platform that you're building. So why don't we spend a few minutes having you just explain what is Nectar? What can customers and developers deploying AI workloads, what can they expect?
For sure. So let me just define who our customer is to make sure it's crystal clear. We view really two customers: telcos, absolutely, in order to enable them to monetize all of the AI workloads that's going to be coming over the networks, and then of course enterprises that want on-prem AI, but maybe not want to build a huge air-cooled screaming MEC in their campus. But let's just focus on the telco for now. So what is Nectar? It's two things. It's hardware and it's software. The hardware we call the box. It's a 9 foot cubed immersion-cooled sealed enclosure that can be very easily deployed very far over the edge, like macro 5G towers, points of presence, metro edge hubs, you name it. Because it's immersion cooled, you can pack a whole whack of GPUs in there in a really dense place, and because it's totally enclosed, it can go in slightly dirty environments, which opens the door considerably for these telcos and tower companies to just be able to enable potential customers to consume Edge AI as a service. So that's the box. But what really enables the adoption is what we're calling the brain. Just came up with it yesterday. So the brain its purpose is to fill the current gap in the market when it comes to orchestration. You touched on it. Holy cow. Think in like a couple of years when the market actually is validated and we start getting a lot of momentum, you're right. There's going to be freaking models everywhere. How do we orchestrate it all? Well, currently we do have the cloud orchestration layer. That's great. Absolutely need it. Everything is initially built, trained up in the cloud as it should be. And then we have great companies like Sedata. You spoke with them a couple of weeks ago. They're on the fleet level of orchestration, where they take the models from whatever cloud that you have, and they solve the problem of making sure the models go to the right places in the right units across your fleet of edge devices. But it's not really necessarily edge AI devices.
Right.
What's really missing is node level orchestration. So let's say that the data shoots a model out to a box, just an edge AI box. Okay, and we use local breakout UPF in order to intercept traffic to process those workloads. Okay, cool. Traffic goes to the box. Well, then what? Do we just use Kubernetes and just have a very kind of static sequential queue approach of, okay, well, workload one's done, let's go on to two? No. What we're doing is taking telemetry from the 5G network when available, as well as GPU and thermal telemetry in order to inform how to admit workloads, where to place them, where to route them. And we're also building in a reinforcement coach that essentially optimizes over time. TLDR, and based off of NVIDIA research in kind of the same area, we could be able to squeeze out 2 to 3 times more throughput, more efficiency per watt just by doing this. And that is something very unique that we're going to be able to do because we have access to both 5G and inbox telemetry.
Interesting. You touched on telco, and I think what's also unique about how you're solving the distributed AI workload play is you're also exploring a really unique business model too, right? One that puts, I would say, more value in the hands of the carriers without spilling too much of your secret sauce. I'd love to have you share with those listening with us today, kind of how you expect to take or planning to take this to market, and what's unique about that.
For sure. Well, like I mentioned before, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what has prevented adoption, specifically in telcos. And if there are telco partners listening, I'm sure you've heard of the AI RAN Alliance that was founded by NVIDIA and a whole bunch of other telco partners.
Right.
And their messaging was, hey, buy our very great Grace Hopper enabled servers that you can put and your macro towers and points of presence that can run your 5G core functions. And by the way, you have excess GPUs that you can monetize. Cool. Well, problem is they're freaking expensive, number one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And probably even more importantly, if your core business is not edge AI cloud, you should probably not build an edge AI cloud because of its sheer complexity. Telcos have openly said that Verizon, we talked about the Verizon CTO, that whole AI RAN model where the telcos themselves would go purchase the equipment and build their own cloud. While it sounds nice, in practice, it's going to be very challenging, if not infeasible in some respects because of the complexity, skills gap. So I believe that the priority for telcos should be to focus on getting to market as soon as possible. Like, holy cow, why haven't we got edge AI? In fact, the research has already shown telcos and enterprises alike have said, we want to consume edge AI as a service. Okay, great. Buy it. Don't build it. Focus on deploying it. Focus on getting the customers and enabling this amazing opportunity. So that's kind of our model. And to just click in, okay, well, how do telcos make money? We would lease our box, for some monthly rate, and then the telcos would be able to, using the brain, split off private slices for customers and even enable pay-as-you-go services as well. So really, we're going to finally make the dream of AI RAN a reality. We're going to give that turnkey solution to telcos where they can monetize their network.
Yeah, and there's a nuance in that I think is worth also highlighting. Right, this what you're building with Nectar highly complements the existing ecosystem, the existing
Yes,
ecosystem of private clouds, hyperscale clouds, telco clouds. Is that a fair statement?
it is a perfectly correct statement. We're partner fit, not lock in.
Yeah,
With UPF and MEC vendors, we're the governed inference fabric. With the hyperscalers, we're the edge execution tier, protecting the P95 and trimming backhaul and egress, but all the training and ops still stay in the cloud. For telcos and towercos, we're just giving them a way to enable GPU per hour monetization and defer some transport upgrades. So in other words, we're the piece that makes sure that each partner gets exactly what they need.
yeah,
And just touching on the cloud, I think it's important to really stress, is Nectar cannibalizing the cloud? Absolutely freaking not. Right now, we can't scalably enable real-time AI compute because we can't provide scalable 20 millisecond latency. So imagine we deploy Nectar boxes everywhere in a Hive-like fashion. We finally can. Well, that's going to unlock the next AI revolution. Like we really don't have a whole lot of real-time AI apps. Well, how are those models going to be trained? Where are they going to be trained? They're going to be trained up in the cloud, up in the AI factories. So I really see us as Nectar being a growth engine for the
yeah.
entire infrastructure ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to me, it's mind blowing that there's not enough discourse in the market about how important this is to go solve. And maybe that's just part and parcel of enterprises are still kind of finding their journey in AI and realizing, oh, there's going to be some bottlenecks in that journey, bottlenecks that exist like bringing data out from the edge and making that useful to their models as they build it out, and eventually going to Gen AI, which allows them to do so much more. Right. Great. You mentioned POCs as your next stop. I think this is probably a good place to just have you reflect or share what your plans are in terms of what's next for Nectar, Q4 POCs, and then I think there's probably some other things you've got planned beyond that.
Yeah. So right now we're actually raising our pre-seed round, and this quarter we're going to be launching our 90-day pilots, and we're going to prove with our industry partners sub 20 millisecond latency, cutting backhaul by at least 70%. And once we prove that out, we're just going to scale by stamping out these boxes and brains to hundreds of points of presence. Like there's American Tower itself has almost 250,000 towers across the US.
Crazy, yeah.
There's a lot of potential scale here. But the looking further, once we raise our pre-seed and we're beginning to raise our seed round, the milestones that we're targeting are getting our technological readiness up to level 6, ready for small production rollouts. Continue working with the 2 system integrators that we are right now in order to help actually bring this to customers, as well as take those pilots that we're going to be starting in Q4 and rolling them out to multiple different POPs.
Excellent. Well, we're excited. I can't wait to hear about the first round of POCs that get into market in Q4, and then obviously being on this journey with you as you continue growing the Nectar fabric and realizing this market. Alex, thank you
Yes.
so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your perspectives. We certainly learned a lot. I think this is a great time for us to wrap up today's episode. From redefining where compute lives to enabling smarter, faster, and more resilient infrastructure, Nectar is shaping the future of decentralized AI and decentralized IT. Alex, thank you again for sharing your journeys, your insight, and more importantly, your vision. I think you're right. Now is the time for what you're building to take advantage of this huge AI potential, and more importantly, harnessing a lot of that data that sits out on the edge. So for those who are building and buying at the edge, now's the time to paying attention to what Alex is up to with Nectar. Don't forget to subscribe to Innovation Unplugged, our podcast series. leave us a review. Tell us how we're doing, and do share this episode with your teammates and friends as well. Until next time, keep innovating and stay unplugged. And Alex, thanks again for spending time with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Of course.